unfortunately, it's not possible to hear you. Maybe to change the...
Sing. I don't know what.
Something about doubling the
Yeah, she's talking
sort of
about
figure.
whether
traces and objects.
more addition or subtraction is, in other words, from a given zero, are we talking about addition or subtraction? And I would argue we're talking about both.
Right.
Both and, but no, that's all right. We already answered the question.
Oh, we did.
wants to come forward, you know.
Yeah, why doesn't she move here?
So
weird.
We've already
Maybe.
answered the question.
I think we got it.
I think we got it.
Yeah. We understood it. We heard it.
Answered your question. So, anyway, I think that we're approaching the end of the session and that we will have to leave discussion.
Wait, there's another hand that's up. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Please, because
Yeah.
it was
So I have one question because you mentioned about Belgrade and how the history should be, you know, it has been erased, but it should be brought back somehow. And you also talked about how in many projects you were trying to, there is always that part of you that wants to make something that isn't really literate, that doesn't have a hidden message. There was a question, is it really possible if you, if you try many different, ways of making something, is it possible to make something that doesn't have a hidden message? But there, I think there are two things that confuse me there, because first of all, when I look at something, I have my own experience of that, and I somehow raise my own messages that I don't really know if it's supposed to be said to me or not. So how do you think it is possible to bring back some pieces of history, and for people who are not architects and who maybe do not see something that architects see that isn't or is there? How is it possible to do something and not create some effect that can change everything in an opposite direction and be misunderstood?
Well, you assume that because you may not understand something, that therefore everyone can't understand. And I thought the idea of culture was to transcend those who can't understand, at least create a desire to understand. I mean, I don't understand when I go to the opera, the person sitting next to me who, is oohing and ahhing about whether the soprano hits the note or not. I wouldn't know whether the soprano hits a note, but it's very important to the person next to me because I don't have an ear. I'm tone deaf. I would argue that if we were to reach the lowest common denominator of what the average person does, we would have a mess on our hands. And I would argue that we must strive as architects to reach and to ask others to reach at a certain level of understanding and sophistication. When you say, I only base on what I see, how do you know that you know enough to see? You assume you do. I don't think you do. And therefore, that's my assumption, right? That's why I teach. That's why I do what I do. And that's why when I hear voices like yours, I get worried that, I can't teach everybody, And so therefore, I just have to do what I consider to be enough expertise that others who possess the same possibility at least understand. Because when James Joyce wrote Finnegan's Wake, I'm certain he didn't care whether anybody understood what he was doing or not. I'm certain that when Michael Haneke makes a film, he doesn't care whether it's entertaining or not. He's interested in the quality of film and the culture of film as important in the society. So that's what, unfortunately, architecture, I believe, is the same situation. It's either literary, it's filmic, it's conceptual at the highest level, and we cannot worry about whether you, representing everybody or every man, can understand or not. Because if that was the case, we would gradually devolve into chaos.
I would add slightly, though, to that answer, because I think that the ideal response would be that you would be provoked to try and find out more, right? So that, I mean, you may bring to it, you may understand it, you may read it and say, I think this, but you are also very aware that it's something that you haven't seen before, and you would want to enter into what makes it. And so, which is, I think, the same, I think anyone can pick up Joyce and say, whoa, you know, and try to figure out, well, why is this the way it is? And so there's a sense of it's a ticket to enter into a disciplinary discourse, which I think part of your answer gets misunderstood as that expertise being an incredibly thin layer. And I actually think that expertise is quite thick within architecture. It should be. So it needs to be understood as that's just part of our discipline. So,
But wait, let's just go back to Jörg Gleiter's idea. Jörg says that the important thing that we're talking about this morning has to do with the index versus the icon. Yet the only reason why anyone in this world would hire Scott Cohen, Peter Eisenman, or many of the architects that are here is precisely because they think we produce icons. And in fact, we tell them that we're producing icons. That's the stadium we produced in Phoenix, Arizona. We said it's going to be an icon. We can't tell them it's going to be an index because then they would shrivel up and go away. So you can say it's a very thick layer, but I think it's a really very, very thin layer, and that we need to distinguish between icons and indices. But I don't need to tell my clients. I mean, we're going to be in the Biennale with a project that we're going to show at the end of the conference in Istanbul. The people in Istanbul think it's an icon. I think that's great. It ain't no icon, it's an index, right? But if I tried to say that's an index and Hearst says there's a difference, then they start to go, right? And then we're in trouble. So I don't know where this
You get to build your index
occurs, because right at that moment between icon and index, there's an enormous problem culturally. And we wouldn't be talking to an audience of potential builders and sponsors of building about indices. We would be talking, Scott would be Mr. Icon, right? I build icons in China, I build them all over the world, right? And your buildings are purposely iconic, right? But they may honestly be indexable. No?
Other things.
Among other things. But they are iconic.
They have their problems. The problems that internal to them, that such an audience preoccupied with whether they're an icon would not understand or be interested in.
Not understand.
I mean, I think the point that Peter's making, which is taboo in our field, is that there are different audiences for the work. And I mean, what he said about being in an opera was very, clear. I mean, I think what we have to believe as people who don't understand opera is that it is important that things we don't understand are there, even if we don't. That's what has to happen in architecture. We have to be able to imagine that despite the inability of people to understand, and potentially to never understand it, it is moving, it is still changing the world or affecting them in ways that can't be explicit. The fact that we would deny ourselves the opportunity to know about it because we're afraid that it's, elite to know it and others don't, is the problem that's undermining our knowledge of our discipline. Our fear of our independent discourse.
Okay. time to add. I want to add to that if we as architects don't give ourselves arguments to operate with, to make our discipline somehow move or perform, even when designing, then we have no clue what to do. That would be my way of saying that an opposition between a critical approach to the discipline or a performative approach to the discipline is really an opposition. For me, if you are not critical about the approach, you wouldn't know what to do next. So you wouldn't know how to perform. For me, that is an opposition that doesn't exist. And so for me to insist that a discipline could exist and should exist is a precondition to perform at all in our field.
Okay, now I think that we have to end this session. It was really a great honor to have you all here on the stage, and I just wanted to say that maybe to engage someone in between form and space is something that we were all talking about this morning, and not to understand it completely. So maybe this could be something that we are going to go to the next session. Thank you very much to all.